Hi all, I hope you're having a great day so far. But today in math algebra today we're going to go on to the second day of Pythagorean Theorem. So I just want to do a quick little reminder of what is the Pythagorean Theorem. So I'm going to write that over here in red. The Pythagorean Theorem is if a right triangle, okay, if a right triangle, I'm going to abbreviate triangle there, then it is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, with a and b being legs of a right triangle, which are the two sides that make up the 90-degree angle, and C being the hypotenuse. Okay, C being the hypotenuse. All right, I'm not going to spell that right. Okay, but remember, you might also see me say that as leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. Okay, my thing is not writing very well. Hypotenuse squared. Okay, if you see that, that's the same thing as, or if I say that that's the same thing as a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, so that's what we were talking about yesterday. That's what we found out yesterday. And also yesterday we were talking about if you were given three side lengths, could you determine if it's a right triangle, which is called the converse, which is you just take this ending of it, so the a squared plus b squared equals c squared kind of idea, and you say that first. If that actually happens, then it must be a right triangle. Okay, so what I want you to do right now is there's the problem on your screen. Determine if the following sides make a right triangle. Why don't you go ahead and pause the video and try and solve this problem. Alright, so now that we've done this, now that you've tried this one, now you need to actually try this. So remember, A and B, our legs are going to be our shortest sides here. Okay, our shortest sides are 7 and 10. If you don't know what the square root of 149 is, you need to just type that in the calculator. Okay, but the square root of 149 is bigger than 7 and 10. So we're going to take 7 and 10 and we're going to make that our legs, and our hypotenuse, okay, I'm going to abbreviate there at h by p, is square root of 149. Alright, so now when we do this, we're going to do the legs squared, so 7 squared plus 10 squared, and our question is that equal to the square root of 149, and that whole thing is squared now. Okay, because that's our hypotenuse, equals hypotenuse squared. Now when we solve this here, we're going to do 7 squared is 49, plus 10 squared is 100, and the square root of 149 squared is just 149. You can use a calculator that, or we also know the square root and the square root are inverse operations, and they cancel each other out. And that's still our question. And 49 plus 100 is 149, and that is equal to the other side. So is this a right triangle? We would go back and we would say, yes, this is a right triangle. Okay, it is blah, 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 a right triangle. Okay, and now you could say, yes, it is a right triangle because the Pythagorean theorem works. Okay, the Pythagorean theorem tells us that it does. So therefore we are. So we can use the theorem to then prove if something is a triangle or not, a right triangle or not. Okay. So now let's go on to the second part for today. So now we're going to be going on to finding the missing side length for a given right triangle. So that now that we know the right triangle is, we know it's a right triangle, we can be given just two side lengths, okay, two side lengths here, and that will then tell us if it is, we can then use that, knowing it's a right triangle, to then find the third side length, so the side that's missing. Okay, so here we go. So I'm going to do an example here. Example number 1, I got 12 meters and I got 7 meters. This is I'm trying to find that third side. Okay, so we need to figure out which side are we missing. Are we missing a leg or are we missing a hypotenuse? Okay, if we're missing a leg, we know that's either A or B. You know we're missing the hypotenuse, that is C. Okay, and remember, hypotenuse is the side opposite of the 90-degree angle. So I always like to check opposite of 90-degree angle. That is that side that I drew the arrow to. Okay, that is actually our C. So the hypotenuse is not known. Okay, so that's what I'm going to leave as my variable. Okay, so that means A and B have to be the other sides. Our legs have to be the other side. So I'm going to call A my 12 and B my 7. Okay, so when I do this, I'm going to use leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared, okay, which is 12 squared, okay, my leg, which one of them is 12, plus my other leg is 7. We know that's our B, and we got to square that, and that has to equal our hypotenuse squared, which I labeled as my C. Okay, so I'm going to leave that as C squared. We don't know what that is. That's what we're trying to figure out. Is what is that C length? That is, this part that I highlighted is our unknown. We're trying to find that. So now we just use our algebra skills when we solve this. So 12 squared is 144. Okay, and 7 squared, just give me a second, I'm going to change that. 7 squared, so we're going to plus 7 squared, which is 49. And that's going to equal, we can't do anything that's C squared, so that's going to stay the same. So 144 plus 149, you have a calculator to then find that, and that gets you 193. So we have 193 equals C squared. And now that we have the whole left side down to one number, we just need to get c by itself, so we can get rid of the squared. Remember how to get rid of the squared is taking the square root. They're the opposites of each other. This is where you might need your calculator. The square root of 193, I don't even know what that is. So the square root of 193 is 13. Now this one's going to get around. It says 13.89244. So let's just round this to the nearest hundredths like we've always been doing. So this one's going to be 13.89, and that equals my c, because now c squared and c are canceled out. Now remember, we don't have to worry about the negative here because you can't have a negative side length for a triangle, so we're okay with that. Now you just need to make sure you label. This one is in meters, so I'm going to go ahead and label that in meters. And we now have our answer. Okay. So remember, on this problem what we did was we went ahead and we located our sides that we knew. We knew it was a right triangle, so we could use the Pythagorean Theorem. We then figured out we were missing the hypotenuse side, so that's our c. And we knew the two legs, so I put the legs in, so 12 squared plus 7 squared, because leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared. And then I just solved it using my algebra skills. So I squared both things. Then once I had that all combined together, I got c by itself by doing the square root. We don't have to remember the negative, because the negative doesn't make sense for side lengths of a triangle. You can't have a negative distance. So then we just had our final answer, and we rounded that to the nearest hundredths. And then we labeled. So what I want you to do now is I want you to try example number 2 over here where I put this red star. So go ahead and pause the video and try that problem. Alright, so now doing this one, okay, same thing goes here. We are missing that, so if we locate this here, the hypotenuse. Our hypotenuse is that question. That's the one thing that we didn't know. So that is our c. We're missing our c again. So we're given our two legs here. We're given our leg is 6, so we can call that one if you want, your a, and your b is 8, okay? Now remember, our hypotenuse is always the longest side, so we know our hypotenuse should be longer here than those two numbers. So I'm going to use this here. We're going to go leg squared, so 6 squared, plus the other leg squared, which is 8, so 8 squared, equals our hypotenuse, which we labeled as c, because we don't know that, and that's got to be c squared. This all goes back to the area of the squares on each side have to add up to the area of the hypotenuse squared. The area of the hypotenuse if you make a square on that side. So now we just got to solve this. 6 squared is 36, plus 8 squared is 64, and that equals c squared, which then we can just bring down. So 36 plus 64 is 100, and then 100 equals c squared. We can combine those together. That makes 100. Now you got to get c by itself, so take the square root of both sides, square root of both sides. So then you get c equals 10. Okay, now that we have c equals 10, we don't have to worry about the negative because you can't have a negative distance. Just got to go back and label. So c equals 10 centimeters. So our hypotenuse is 10 centimeters here. All right. Okay, so let's go down and let's try example number 3 now. Okay, given a right triangle still now, we're going to still find the side lengths. We're going to find the side length that is missing. Okay, so I still like to do the same thing. I like to locate the hypotenuse to find my right triangle, my right angle, and I draw an arrow to the opposite side. This time, though, our hypotenuse is given. So we're given the hypotenuse, which means we're missing one of the legs. So I'm just going to label that as my b value, okay? I just label it as my b. It doesn't matter, a or b, I don't really care. Okay, b is the missing. That's the unknown, right? That's that question. So we're going to use the same thing. Leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared, okay? We have 7 is our leg, okay? And then 10 is our hypotenuse, because 10 is that opposite side. So we're going to, one of the legs that we know is 7 squared. Plus, we don't know the other leg, so I'm going to leave that as b squared, equals our hypotenuse squared, which is 10. So I'm going to go 10 squared. Now we're going to solve this just using our algebra skills like we've always done. So 7 squared is 49. We're going to bring down our b squared, so plus b squared, equals 10 squared, which is 100. Now we got to get b by itself, though. So we got to get rid of this 49 first. So we got a minus 49 to both sides. So I minus 49 to both sides. We then get b squared equals 51. Now we can take the square root of both sides. So square root of b squared, square root of 51. You're going to have to use your calculator here. So the square root of 51 is 7.141428. So we're going to round this nearest hundredth again. Hundredth is the second decimal point. So we have 7.14. And we can't forget about the label, which is inches. Now remember, same thing goes. We can't have a negative here. So that's why we don't have to worry about the negative when we do the square root. But we then have our answer. So that leg side, that side of the leg is 7.14. Remember, your leg should not be longer than your hypotenuse. Okay, so if you have the hypotenuse, you know that number's got to be smaller than the hypotenuse, which we have a number smaller than 10, which is correct. Okay, so what I want you to do now is example number 4. I want you to pause the video and try this one now. Okay, so resuming the video now, you have located your hypotenuse, which is 22. Hypotenuse is the side opposite of the right triangle, the right angle. So you have 22. Okay, so that's going to be our hypotenuse. We're missing a leg, so I'm going to label that as B again. That's our unknown. Okay, 18 is a leg, and 22 is our hypotenuse. So we're going to go leg squared, which is 18. We know that one. Plus the other leg, which we don't know, so I'm going to just label that as a B squared, equals our hypotenuse squared, which is 22 squared. Okay. So now 18 squared, in case you don't know what those are, just type in your calculator. 18 squared is 324. Okay. Plus B squared, can't do anything with that, equals 22 squared, which should be 484. Okay, 484. Now we're going to get B by itself. So we're going to minus 324 from both sides first. Minus 324, minus 324. So we get B squared equals, that is going to be 160. Now you can take the square root of both sides. So take the square root. And the square root of 160, in case you don't know, you have your calculator again. Now you're going to round this to the nearest hundredth. So you should have rounded it to B equals, or whatever letter, 12.65. We don't have to worry about the negative here, remember, because you can't have a negative distance. And 12.65, don't forget your label though, this one is in miles. Okay? Now remember, we were given the hypotenuse, so your side length better be shorter than that hypotenuse. And 12.65 is shorter than 22, so we know we are on the right track then. Okay? And there's our final answer. So, do not do this all in your head. Do not do this all in the calculator. You need to make sure you're showing steps. So I would like to see at least that first step there, okay, of writing it out. Then if you show me that second step, that way I know you typed something in the calculator correctly. Then if you show me that next step, that all this highlighted stuff, that's the least amount I would need to see on there. You don't have to show me the portion that I didn't highlight, but if you show me that, that's the minimum amount of work I want to see, just so I can make sure I see your train of thought. And for the ones that were above, the minimum amount of work I'd expect to see is exactly what I wrote. That's what all this stuff is, exactly what I want to see. I don't want to see anything less than that. All right? So, if you have any questions, make sure you are asking me, or looking at the answer key, anything like that. Make sure you get your practice work done, get it turned into Canvas, and you should have a sheet now from the substitute. Have a great rest of your day. If you have any questions, let me know.